Many publicly funded services in Ceredigion have moved to larger towns such as Cardigan or Carmarthen. What will you do to ensure that these services are still available locally?
Well, the important thing to remember is that in the rural community in which we live, I think with something in the region of 147 villages in Ceredigion, it's very important that people have access to those services wherever they are. Ideally, services would be spread out right across our community, but there's a cost implication for the delivery of that. But as a minimum, we've got to look at the way in which people are able to access those services. I've always been of the view that we have an entitlement, rural entitlement, whether that service is given by the third sector or in certainly the public sector. And we need to make sure that public transport's available, car share schemes, whatever it is, so that people practically can reach the services that they need.
Do you think everyone receiving benefits should be made to volunteer and give time back to the community?
I don't think it should be made to volunteer. I think we're getting to areas of compulsion, and given the circumstances for which many people have received benefits, I think that would be very unhelpful. Many people are receiving benefits for obviously reasons of health, whether that be physical health or mental health issues, so we can't have compulsion. What I do know though is that many people who receive benefits want to assist and develop themselves by volunteering. I think that's something the voluntary sector has been good at doing, encouraging people, and of course in this county we're fully aware of how important the third sector is, and of course Carvo bring many of those voluntary organisations together. Volunteering is good right across the age span, but I would be hesitant to suggest compulsion. Encouragement where possible.
What would you do to ensure the future of health and social care services in a rural county like Ceredigion?
Well, the question's right. The emphasis in a rural community such as ours, it does present certain challenges, but certain challenges that have to be responded to by government, and that's one of the reasons why my party's talked about specifically health and social care for the elderly, for instance, and the lack of mental health facilities right across the board. The pension on income tax proposal in our manifesto to raise sufficient funds, £6 billion, of which £300 million would come to Wales, and of course within the context of the Assembly a lot of that money needs to feed its way through to health services and to local authorities as well. We are at risk being seriously short-changed. We've seen care facilities not developed to their full potential here, and we've seen residential care homes shut. There's a whole plethora of needs of particularly elderly people that need to be addressed, and I think that is a resource issue, which is why we've made this very clear commitment on money.
Use 3 words to describe the third sector. What key issues do you feel our sector will face during the next parliamentary term?
I'm going to use the words essential, far-reaching and resourcing, and I'll talk about resourcing in particular. We're all aware of some of the funding streams that the third sector has to contend with, and particularly 3-year funding streams. I think the time frame for those is very, very limited indeed. A good project comes into the field, gets funding for 3 years, and staff are employed, staff do a good job, staff build up their expertise, and then the funding stream stops and we have to go through the cycle again. Far-reaching, I say it's far-reaching because we rely very heavily on it, but particularly I'm thinking physically in terms of a rural community. We've talked earlier about services being centred in towns. The third sector has shown the capacity to get out into the community and actively work with people, and that is so essential in an area like Ceredigion, and essential. I think we've passed the phase when government is responsible for the delivery of all services. That's important, but the third sector does have a really valuable role to play, and without it our communities in Ceredigion would be very, very different places. So we need to encourage the third sector and resource the third sector so that it can carry on the excellent, sometimes very innovative work and projects that it undertakes.